everybody, it's Patrick from Travels with Delaney, bringing you a two-part series on boondocking for beginners. This first video in the series is going to focus on water systems, and then the next video will focus on electrical systems. So what is boondocking? I remember the first time I heard it, it actually kind of scared me. It's not really that scary though. So let's start with campgrounds. So when you go to stay in a campground, you have options. One is the full hookup site. That's where you're going to have your electric, your water, your sewer, and sometimes you even have your cable TV. But you may book a site that only has water and electric, okay? And then you could book what's known as a primitive site. That's where you have no hookups whatsoever. But there's a whole nother category of primitive sites out there, and those are the ones that aren't in the campgrounds, like when you stay at a Walmart, or maybe you find some BLM land. And for those of you out east that aren't really familiar with the BLM land, that's basically government land where you're allowed to camp for free. But when you're camping in either a primitive site or a Walmart parking lot or BLM land, you're not going to have hookups, which means you're going to have no water, no sewer, and no electric. So how do you deal with it? Well, I'm going to share with you how we dealt with it this summer when we went out to Yellowstone and Teton National Parks. We ended up staying in a campground, Coulter Bay, that had absolutely no hookups. But we had the advantage of the fact that the campground actually did have a dump station and they did have a fresh water supply for us, so it actually made it easier. That would be as opposed to when we've stayed at places such as BLM land or a Walmart parking lot, to where there's absolutely no hookups whatsoever, nor do we have access to a dump station or to fresh water supply. So let me share with you today how we deal with the water systems when we're doing boondocking or dry camping, as some people refer to it. Now I'm going to show you where I store my water tanks on our Hummingbird. Our Hummingbird is the 16FD model. If you own a Hummingbird but a different floor plan, your storage may vary. And if you own a completely different trailer, obviously you will have to adjust. The first thing you're going to want to look at is the size of tanks that are on your trailer. So with our particular trailer, it's really easy to remember because all of the tanks are 25 gallons. We have a 25-gallon freshwater supply, a 25-gallon gray tank, and a 25-gallon black tank. It's possible your trailer actually has two gray tanks. Our former trailer, our Cougar fifth wheel, actually had a gray water tank and a galley tank. And when you have two gray tanks like that, typically one is tied to your bathroom, so it's going to be your shower and your sinks, and then the galley is actually tied to your kitchen sink. Just to clarify, in case you're not familiar with the difference between gray and black water is going to be your toilet, all right? Gray water is everything else, your sinks, your shower, things like that. So in a trailer this size with only having 25-gallon tanks, we have to really manage our water supply if we're going to be boondocking. We have found that we can actually go a total of 3 nights if we're cautious using our tanks. If we use a little too much water, then potentially our gray tank will fill before we hit that 3rd night. All right, let me show you what I use for boondocking in relationship to water supply. I purchased 2 tanks. The dark blue tank is our fresh water tank. This is what I use to go and get fresh water to put into the fresh water tank on the Hummingbird. This is actually a 6-gallon. They make these in different sizes and different configurations. I purchased this one because I like the fact that it was a narrow tank and it fits perfect into my outdoor storage. Again, it's a 6-gallon tank. I also purchased this Toten store. I actually purchased this on Amazon, and I use this to take water out of our gray tanks so that I can run it to a dump station when we're dry camping. This also is a 6-gallon. So it worked out really well at Coulter Bay this summer because every morning I would just go ahead and take out 6 gallons from the gray tank, and then on our way out of the park I would dump the gray water that was in here, and at the same time I would go ahead and fill up with fresh 6 gallons of fresh water, and then each evening I would put this back in. And so we just kept a nice supply. We ended up staying there 6 nights and had absolutely no issue. Had we been staying across the street, per se, in the BLM land, then we would have had a little bit different situation, because there in the BLM land there would have been no dump station and no fresh water supply. The longest we've ever went, again, is 3 nights, and When we do that, we have to be very cautious. But before we get to some of the ways we can save water, let me show you exactly how I use these tanks. So once you have your fresh water in your tank, the first thing I do is I pull out the funnel, or the nozzle I should say, place it into the pour position. And then I take the cap off my fresh water tank supply and begin putting in the 6 gallons. Most of these tanks have a release valve that'll allow the water to flow, so don't forget to pull that out. Mine's actually right here on the top. Before we head out camping, if we know we're going to be in a situation where we want to use our freshwater tank, we always make sure that our tanks are completely full. And again, on our tank, it's 25 gallons. I've heard differing opinions about running down the road with water in, and I think you have to do what you're comfortable with. But I'll tell you what I'm comfortable with. Typically, I will, if I'm going to put water in, I go ahead and fill it all the way up. I carry the full 25 gallons. And I actually find the trailer pulls just fine with that in this particular trailer with our tow vehicle. Because I actually like to start the weekend or the week, whatever it's going to be, with the tank full. The other thing is I prefer not to tow with it being half full because as I'd seen on another YouTuber's channel, you think of a cylinder with water half full and you start shaking it. What happens, you start to get the water swishing back and forth. But if it's full, there's no place for it to go. So pretty much anymore, we either travel with basically no water in or we travel with it full. Once we know we're running out, or we know that we think we're going to run out, that's when it's time to pull out our blue tank for fresh water and head and get fresh water in it. Alright, when using the tote and store, the first time I used it, I actually hooked up a short hose between my gray tank and the actual storage. But what I found was, if I'm really careful, I don't actually need to use a hose. I've gotten pretty good at controlling the water flow using just the open and off valve. The other thing is, with the 25-gallon black tank, we have not had to actually use, and my goal is to never use this for the black tank. Again, your situation may vary. We were able to go the full 6 nights at Coulter Bay in the Tetons without dumping the black tank. And when we left on the morning, the 7th morning, the first place we went obviously was the dump station where we emptied the black tank so we could start fresh again. But to actually dump my gray, and again, I can do it 6 gallons at a time, I just open the cap and I align it and I begin slowly opening until I get flow, and then I just let it run until I'm getting close to being full, and then slowly, and I begin adjusting until it's closed. Now I'm not going to tell you I've never dribbled some gray water, but I'm never too concerned about that, mainly because the only water that's coming out of here is water from our shower or water from our kitchen. So even if you get just a little bit on the ground, it should be okay. Seal it up. Put the cap back on, and now you're ready to head to a dump station where you can empty your gray water that you've taken out. And again, for us, we went with the 6 gallon. They make these obviously a lot bigger, and you have to decide what works for you. But for us, this is the perfect size. It fits in our outdoor storage. If you're boondocking, water conservation becomes very important. So a few things that we've done is we changed out our shower head with one of the oxygenetic shower heads. I believe it runs at 2 gallons per minute. The other thing is we take a typical, what is known as a military shower, where we will turn the water on, shut it off, lather up, turn the water back on, shut it off, and so on and so forth. We also bought a low flow aerator for the kitchen sink that runs at a ½ gallon per minute, but still has good water pressure. In fact, it works so well, my wife actually washes her hair in the kitchen sink. So when I say we can make it 3 nights, that means that each evening my wife takes a shower, and then the next morning I take a shower, plus my wife washes her hair. We also will periodically do dishes in the sink. If you watch my 6-month review of our Jayco Hummingbird, you will actually see both of those products in use. Another thing that we have not tried ourselves but we're looking at is when you first turn on the water, it takes a little while to get hot water up to your faucets. So you're actually in essence wasting good water. It's just cold. And so I think what we're going to end up doing for the next time that we're boondocking is we're just going to get a small bowl that we'll place in the sink or in the shower area so that we can collect that water that's coming out until the hot water gets there. Now you might say, well, what are you going to do with that water? Well, we have a couple options. I could just put it right back in the blue tank and then eventually throw it back in the fresh water tank. Or we may use it to heat up using the stove for the purposes of doing dishes. But again, you only really have to worry that much about conservation if you're going to be gone for long periods of time without access to water supply or a dump station. Now, if you're out on BLM land and eventually you are going to need to dump your tanks, where do we go? Well, typically what we look for is going to be something like a truck stop that has a dump station. So the Flying J's, the Loves typically have dump stations, but I will tell you not all Loves do, because we actually stopped at one, I believe it was in Nebraska, thinking we were going to dump the trailer after a couple nights of boondocking, and they did not actually have a dump station. So another option is many campgrounds will charge you a small fee if you just want to pull in and dump your rig using their waste station. So that's another option. If you use the Allstays app, which we talk about in our video of our 5 favorite apps that we use when we're traveling, the Allstays apps will help you locate places that you can actually dump your tanks while you're traveling. So this kind of gives you a little overview of how we deal with water systems when we go dry camping or boondocking, and hopefully if you've never done it, you'll consider looking at how it might work for you. We love dry camping, and the reason we like dry camping or boondocking is, number one, I think you always get a much better place to camp. Typically your national parks or your state parks that don't have hookups, the sites tend to be bigger and more gorgeous, like in a setting like this here in the woods. Number two, many times they're cheaper. And so we've tried to get away from commercial campgrounds, partially because we don't like being stacked into a parking lot. And number two, they're expensive. So when we took the big 3-week trip out west this summer, we could not afford $50, $60, $70 a night. And so that's why we stayed at places that did not have full hookups, because they were a lot cheaper. And we ended up being gone, I believe it was 19 nights, and we only spent $525 in camping fees. And really one of our most expensive was Coulter Bay at $30 a night with no hookups. But we were right in the heart of the Grand Teton National Park, which made it all worthwhile. I hope this video helps you. If you have any questions, please feel free, drop us a comment down below and I'll try to answer them. We are by no means experts in this. We're really beginners, but we just wanted to share the information with you in hopes that it might help you on your next adventure. For now, we'll see everybody on down the road. Thank you.